What if we had Xingqiu but mommified?
あらあら。
At a base level, that's what Yelan can be jokingly described as, but after triple crowning her and playing her non-stop since the update dropped, I've learned that there's actually a lot more to her as a character. Her damage can actually be pretty good at C0, whereas Xingqiu heavily relies on his later constellations to start dealing a ton of damage. Not to mention, her supportive capabilities are also great for offense and go just beyond Hydro application. As always, if you want to know everything about how to build and play our new character, this guide will cover Yelan's best artifacts, weapons, general playstyle, and team compositions. There's a lot to touch upon with a new character, so without further ado, let's get this guide rolling. Before we figure out your best builds for Yelan, you're going to want to know a few things to really simplify and understand Yelan's combat capabilities. I'm sure you already know the basics of Yelan's abilities from version previews. She runs really fast and marks opponents to deal hydro damage with her ability, and her elemental burst works the same way as Xingqiu's burst, where normal attacks from your characters trigger a coordinated hydro attack. If there's one thing that you might not know about both of these abilities, it's that their damage scales entirely off HP. What this means is that attack is pretty much a useless stat for Yelan's ability damage. If you want to maximize her hydro damage, we only need HP. This is a little bit different from a character that needs a mix between HP and attack like Zhongli. Besides that, Yelan also wants to focus a lot of energy recharge because her elemental skill only generates 3 to 4 hydro particles. With a 70 energy cost burst, it's going to be difficult to maintain consistent burst uptime. Luckily for you, there are plenty of options to remedy this energy problem that I'll cover in the artifact and weapon sections of this video. And last but not least, what really sets Yelan apart from Xingqiu is her supportive capability. Aside from Hydro application, Xingqiu brings some healing and interruption resistance to the team. These kinds of defensive buffs are really useful with characters like Hu Tao, who sacrifices HP and uses a lot of stamina to charge attack and sprint. On the other hand, Yelan sets herself apart from Xingqiu by offering offense rather than defense. Her second Ascension talent increases the damage of the character on the field by up to 50% as long as her elemental burst is active. Yelan's buff starts out super small, but it scales up during the duration of Yelan's burst, rewarding sustained damage dealers over screenshot-worthy damage. And if you're into theory crafting, another great thing to know about this buff is that it's completely dynamic and cannot be snapshotted. Furthermore, it only applies to the character on field and ignores off-field damage, including Yelan herself. With that being said, sorry to any theory crafter who likes to slap Xiangling with every hydro support known to man. Yelan would probably say something like, tough luck. Yelan's artifacts are really intuitive and simple, but I'm not gonna lie, she's not the easiest character to build. As mentioned before, she's a really energy hungry character, and beyond energy recharge, we still need a lot of HP and crit stats. With that being said, her best in slot artifact set is the 4-set Emblem of Severed Fate, which is probably one of the most forgiving sets when it comes to energy-hungry characters. In general, I suggest that Yelan's benchmark energy recharge is around 200% total ER, sometimes even more. In order to reach 200% energy recharge, the 4-set ESF gives 20% ER, and it turns all of the excess ER into elemental burst damage. Overall, it's a no-brainer for Yelan because it gives her the best elemental burst damage as well. If you're looking for alternative combinations, you can pick between any of the 2 sets of the 2-set Heart Adept, 2-set Emblem of Severed Fate, 2-set Noblesse Oblige, and 2-set Tenacity of the Millelith. Any combination that contains 2 of these sets are good for getting Yelan's stats up. Even the full 4-set Noblesse works if you're purely focused on buffing your teammates. As for artifact stats, the Hourglass wants energy recharge or HP percent, the Goblet wants hydro damage bonus, and the Circlet wants crit rate or crit damage. If you can get around 200% energy recharge through artifact substats and your weapon stats, go for HP percent in the Sands. Otherwise, you're going to want ER in the Sands main slot and go for HP percent in substats on your artifact pieces. Of course, hydro damage bonus is standard for any hydro character, and you can choose between crit rate or crit damage depending on which you lack more. Substat focus for Yelan is crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, HP percent, and flat HP. Pretty simple stuff that mirrors exactly what she wants from main stats. Moving into weapons, this is where most of the variety happens when it comes to building Yelan. Starting off with her clear best in slot, we have Yelan's signature weapon, Aqua Simulacra. This bow is pretty much the Staff of Homa of bows, and it's straight up broken. Given that Yelan doesn't really need attack, the low base attack is not even a downside of this bow. Instead, Yelan gets an insane 88% crit damage stat, extra damage against enemies if they're nearby, and an increase in her HP as well. Just the pure stat value allows you to really focus on energy recharge in artifacts. Beyond Aqua Simulacra, Yelan becomes really free-to-play friendly for players, which is definitely a positive for this new character. In the number 2 and 3 spots, we have Favonius Warbow and Sacrificial Bow. Favonius Warbow is a completely free-to-play option, and it's a phenomenal bow on Yelan. It has a super high energy recharge stat and a passive that solves her energy problem. Sacrificial Bow has a lower energy recharge stat, and it trades it for a chance to reset your elemental skill cooldown, which effectively increases your damage and energy generation at the same time. I mean, the bow looks nice on Yelan, and taking a gamble on the passive fits her character perfectly, right? In the number 4 spot, we have Elegy of the End. It has a really nice energy recharge stat like Favonius Warbow, but the passive is more selfless than selfish. Instead of providing benefits to Yelan, use this weapon if you want to buff some of your pyro hyper carries like Hu Tao, Yoimiya, Diluc, etc. And last but not least, the last weapon that most players should be considering is the new bow, Fading Twilight. This bow has some great solo damage potential and has a little bit of energy recharge to boot. Unfortunately, the lower energy recharge stat and passive that doesn't grant any extra energy means that you're going to have to work a little bit harder in artifacts to ensure that your elemental burst is consistently ready. Otherwise, Fading Twilight is definitely a good bow for Yelan if you're using Favonius Warbow on another character like Diona. As for other bows like Scoured Harp or Polar Star, or maybe even the Alley Hunter and Moon's Moon, these weapons aren't really horrible for damage. However, as I've already repeated 1,000 times in this video, energy is a problem for Yelan, and it will be a struggle for you to find the right artifacts to fit these weapons. My advice would be to stick to her signature weapon or the energy recharge options that I mentioned before. And last but not least, we have Yelan's teams. Since she is a new character, things are a little bit up in the air when it comes to her definitive best teams. So with that in mind, here are some of my thoughts and what I've tested so far. I think these teams are going to be good performing teams regardless of how serious you are about the game. It's easy to just say use Yelan wherever you'd use Xingqiu, but as someone who doesn't like to half-ass their work most of the time, I like to go a little bit deeper than that. The first team we have is the Hu Tao and Yelan combo. Now I could stop right there and say switch Xingqiu with Yelan, but the issue with Yelan replacing Xingqiu in these Hu Tao teams is the idea of hydro application and elemental gauge theory. I know a lot of you don't care about this kind of stuff, so to put it as simply as I can, you should be cautious about which teammates to use in the last 2 slots. Without Yelan's extra hydro application from her C2, teammates like the double Geo combo or Electro Charge with Vaporize will take away Vaporizes from Hu Tao since Yelan's hydro application is weaker than Xingqiu's. So the teammates that I'd recommend with Yelan and Hu Tao are either Sucrose or Kazuha in the 3rd slot. Both of these characters will heavily buff the reactions between Yelan and Hu Tao, and additionally their burst can be infused with Hydro to provide more Hydro application alongside Yelan. For the 4th slot, you can run Pyro characters like Amber with Elegy of the End or Toma/C4 Yanfei for shielding. All of these characters have low Pyro application, which means as long as you infuse your Anemo burst with Hydro, Yelan can keep up with Hu Tao's Pyro application. Alternatively, if you're really concerned about other characters stealing Vaporize reactions from Hu Tao, you can even double down on the Hydro and run both Yelan and Xingqiu in the same team. Not only does it give us consistency on the Hydro application, but it also lowers the energy requirements for both Xingqiu and Yelan, which in practice feels really nice to play with. And of course, if you don't have Hu Tao, you can replace her with any other Pyro carry. I just use Hu Tao here because she is the talk of the town for theory crafters, and she's the Pyro character that eats up Vaporize reactions faster than any other character. Outside of Pyro carries, you can also use Yelan with standard teams like the National Team or Freeze Team. I'm sure you've already heard of these setups many times, so I'm not going to go too deep in the explanation of them. I think one of the best national team setups with Yelan is going to be with Raiden Shogun because of how she can battery Yelan for more energy and how the team doesn't rely on Vaporize nearly as much as other national variants. As for freeze teams, the general setup should be a Cryo DPS, a Cryo support, Yelan, and an Anemo support. Yelan works with normal attacking characters, so the most obvious character to pair her with is Ayaka. That means Diona would be the best cryo support because of her healing, and the Anemo character would be Venti for energy or Kazuha for buffing. So far, all the teams I've listed have revolved around 5-star characters, and I know some players may not have these characters to build around. Luckily for you, patch 2.7 has opened up a path in team building that we've never been able to walk down before. The last team I'd like to talk about is Yelan in a Taser team, but with a twist. Generally, the issue with Taser teams is healing because the only slot that's available for healing is the Hydro character slot. Yelan unfortunately can't heal like Xingqiu or Kokomi can, but with Kuki Shinobu, we finally have an Electro healer to slot into Taser teams. As such, the Taser team I'd like to recommend is Yelan, Kuki Shinobu, Sucrose, and either Fischl, Beidou, or Raiden. Although Kuki doesn't really provide much damage at all, and she doesn't arrive till the second half of 2.7, I think this team is a great budget option for players who don't have some of the strongest 5-star characters in the game. I don't want to expand on a team too much that I haven't been able to test myself, but if you want to know more about this team, definitely let me know down below and I'll explore it some more. Good luck to everyone pulling for Yelan, and besides that, that's all I have time for today. I'll definitely do some more testing with Yelan and Kuki Shinobu as time passes, but for now, if you enjoyed this guide or thought it was useful, be sure to support both the video and the channel. You can follow me on Twitch, join my Discord, sub to the YouTube channel, or whatever people do nowadays. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.